Welcome to House Talk on KAFM 88.1 Community Affairs. This is a local program that features experts to discuss real estate topics of interest to home buyers and sellers in Mesa County. I'm your host. I'm Kate Porras. I'm a realtor at RE/MAX 4000. And as always, we're going to kick it off with some stats for our real estate market here in Mesa County. So we're going to start, as we always do, with the average sold price for the month of January. And this is where we're finally seeing some difference from what we've been experiencing over the last couple of years. We did have prices come down. Again, this is only for the month of January. 1 month's numbers. The average sold price in Mesa County was about $395,000. You compare that to the month before December, that was at $452,000. Sounds like a huge drop, and it is a significant drop, but you also have to look at some of the other months that were what we saw previously last year. For example, there was the same amount of drop between September and October of 2022. That price then rebounded and increased into December. So 1 month of statistics doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, but it is something that definitely we're going to be watching as we go throughout the rest of the year. You look at that also, the total number of properties that sold in January of this year, 169. Now that's residential, commercial, business opportunities, things like that. 169, that really is not very many, especially if you compare it to January of 2022 when 278 properties sold this time last year. So a big difference there as well. And then if you look at our inventory, this is our list, our numbers where it shows, if we have 1 month, how much property do we have to sell? So if you're in the under $200,000 range, you don't even have a month's supply of inventory right now. Those homes are flying off the market if there even are homes to sell. If you look somewhere in the $300,000 to $500,000 range, that's about a 3-month supply. Still a little bit more on the seller side there. We look at a balanced market when you're about 4 to 5 months supply of inventory. You don't even get to that point until you're close to $1 million for the properties. Then it's definitely a buyer's market. But up until that price, for the most part, it's more of a seller's market or even more of a balanced market. That said, though, buyers, good news for buyers, because our average days on market is now 99. That's up quite a bit from what we've been seeing, and that number has been growing as we've been going through the last several months. What that means is buyers are getting the opportunity to actually take the time, really look at several homes and not have to decide instantly if it's a house that they're going to want to buy, because they do have a little bit of time before those homes are getting sold. So good news for buyers there. Sellers, though, I'll tell you, just anecdotally speaking to other agents in the market here over this last weekend and looking at open houses were really busy and very well attended by buyers. So that's an indication that, buyers are starting to get active, and we'll see what happens this spring. Spring is usually a very busy time for selling homes here in Mesa County. And if it's any indication of what we saw this weekend with buyers getting out and looking, we might have a pretty strong selling season here in spring. So speaking of homes, because this is House Talk, we wanted to bring in Landon and Amy Barr today. They are the owners of Jerry's Pest Control, and you all have been doing pest control, family owned and operated, for decades now. So you know pests pretty well here in Mesa County. Do I have that right?
You do. We are third generation family owned and operated. We've been in the Valley since 1958, so we are celebrating 65 years.
Wow. Well, considering if you're a home buyer or a seller, none of us want to have pests in our homes. And I thought we'd talk about that a little bit today. There's a common misconception, I think, that bugs and mice and all those critters take the winter off. Is that true?
That is correct. People think it's too cold for them to be active right now, but that's not the case. Ants right now, especially in slab homes, are coming up in search of food and water. They need to replenish their supply because they're running low. Mice have been going strong since summer, basically. And then, of course, with this warmer weather, we're getting roach calls, spider calls, things like that. So it's starting to get active again.
Yeah, I had a client that called me up and she said, hey, I have these little beetles in my house. What are they? And of course, I have no idea. I'm like, you need to call a professional and ask that. But she was very surprised because it had been very cold. It was January, yet these critters were coming into our house. And so I guess that's not necessarily uncommon.
No, it's not. And once the sun hits like the south side of the house and warms things up, it will get things moving.
And that's exactly where they were coming from, that south side of the house.
That is the most common spot for pests to come out, wouldn't you say, Landon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, generally the elm seed beetles typically like to be on the warmer side of the house.
Can you prevent them from coming into the house?
They're flying insects, so I can't guarantee to kill all of them. But you can prevent by caulking around your windows, sealing up holes that they can be climbing into, and getting a general spray around the outside windows and doors.
So is it windows and doors primarily where they're coming in? Are there other ways that they can get into your house?
Around the eaves sometimes is a good area. There's just a little enough of a spacing for them to slide into, and it's a perfect spot for them to winter over.
Are these spaces that you actually can see or with your naked eye, or are they just small enough these guys can find a way?
Typically, they're small enough that they can see them. Some of them, you can, as a homeowner, if you start looking and noticing like a little gap might be getting a little bigger, it's time to reseal, recaulk it, just take care of it. And that helps with bugs in general, just to help keep them out, is sealing up all those little areas.
You're listening to House Talk on KAFM Grand Junction. In the studio today are Amy and Landon Barr with Jerry's Pest Control. So you mentioned elm seed bugs. What are some of the most common pests that we see in homes?
Most common, we have, of course, the ants, spiders, oriental roaches, earwigs, crickets. The mice this past year and a half have just gone crazy.
Is there any reason why? Do you know?
So this summer we had all that moisture, all the rain. That provided more food sources and water sources for them. And when they have those sources, they reproduce more.
That makes sense. Is that just for mice or other insects too?
Other insects as well. Oriental roaches love water, so the more access they have to things like that, the more they can populate and become a problem.
So this winter, we've been talking about all this great snow that we've been getting in the mountains and even snow and rain here in the valleys too. What does that mean then for this coming spring?
All depends on that, how quickly it melts. But if there's excess moisture, there's going to be excess bugs and mice.
So not necessarily the snow now, it's what happens if how wet the soils are, things like that. Is that what we're talking about?
Right, how quickly it runs off, melt off, things like that. If we have a good water supply, a good water table under the valley like Main Street is known for, the roaches love that.
So let's talk about roaches because you brought that up. Not a favorite topic, I'm not going to say that. But are there other insects or critters that people misidentify as roaches? I've heard different things out there like, oh, I have roaches, and then someone says those aren't roaches, those are something else.
People will call them water bugs just because I think that name they think sounds better, but they are a roach. We don't have true water bugs here.
Okay. Are there different types of roaches?
There are. The valley actually has 3. The most common is oriental roaches. They're a common outside bug, so anybody can get these kind of roaches because they just live outside. Of course, if they go and treat it in your house, they can become a problem. And then we have German roaches, which have to be introduced into the home. Those are a little bit more difficult to get rid of. They'll infest your cupboards, your closets, things like that. So they take a few more treatments to get rid of. And then we have brown banded, which we don't see a lot of, but they can be a little more difficult as well.
So how do you know, what do they look like? What's the difference?
Oriental roaches are typically 1 inch to 1.5 inches big, sometimes longer than that if they survive the winter well. Kind of a reddish, darkish brown. German roaches only get to 1/2 inch. They're golden brown or like a blondish brown. And then brown bandit are 1/2 inch, and they're brown with a band on their back.
Okay, so, but we're talking up to 1 inch or so. That's a good sized critter in your house.
Yes, it is.
Don't want those in the house.
Not at all.
What do you do to prevent that?
A good pest control treatment, especially monthly, can help reduce how many bugs you have inside. And then again, like we were talking, the sealing up around the home really does help reduce the number you can get inside.
So Landon, you mentioned elm seed bugs.
Mm-hmm.
I know we didn't always have those here, correct?
Right.
I remember growing up, and I don't remember seeing those here, but then, as a real estate agent over the last several years, you'd be showing houses and sometimes the front door is literally alive with these bugs crawling all over them.
Yeah, it was, 4 or 5 years ago that they moved in from a general area. But we have seed trees all the way around the valley, so that's what they love, is those trees.
So are they here to stay then, or is this something where they're passing through maybe, or how does that work?
No, the number of years they've been here and the amount of elm trees we have, they're probably here to stay.
Well, that's unfortunate, darn it.
It is, but sealing up around your home, a good pest control can help really reduce the numbers you have.
So when do you treat for those? Because don't those typically come out, actually, probably pretty soon we should start seeing those coming out?
Right now, they're going to still be in the trees because they eat the seeds from the elm trees. So the ones people are having now, which actually I had a call today about them, are the ones that wintered over like in their eaves or in their wall. And as things are warming up, they're getting active.
Okay, so then they eat the seeds, and then what happens? So when do they really start popping?
Usually it's about June. People really notice the big influx of them. Kind of like a lot of things with the valley, it all depends on the weather.
Sure. Makes
The
sense.
hotter it gets, the more they're trying to get out of those trees to the shadier parts of your home.
And how do you treat them?
It's usually a spray application that we do, and we concentrate around the windows, doors, eaves, the sides of houses, things like that.
So if people were to get rid of the elm trees around their house, would that prevent that?
It would. It most definitely would. Also, if they have them treated, the trees treated when they're still in the trees would help as well.
And is that something that you provide too, or is that a special service?
That's a special service, not something we do, but we can refer you to somebody.
Okay, that's good to know. So you might need to treat the trees and then also maybe treat your house as well.
Definitely.
Okay, what's a good time of year to treat then?
If you're having pest issues, now's the time to do it. If you're not and you're wanting just kind of an overall thing to help prevent bugs or get rid of them, we usually don't notice an increase in activity until the weather's consistently warm and we have less overnight freezing. So late spring, early summer is a good time typically.
You're listening to House Talk on KAFM Grand Junction. In the studio today, Amy Barr and Landon Barr from Jerry's Pest Control. So what are the different options for treating? Is it just spray, or are there different options for different things?
It really depends on what you have, but like for ants, we do baiting, and roaches, especially like the German roaches, we do baiting as well. Sometimes we can do glue boards or something depending on the situation, but spraying is probably the quickest way to get rid of them.
And is there any concern if you have like small children or pets that, they don't want them in contact with some of these treatments?
If we're treating inside, we do ask that people and pets stay out for 2 hours. We like to just be cautious, let it dry, time to air out. This is the same treatments, though, we do in the local hospitals, nursing homes, daycares. So we're out to kill bugs, not you.
That is good to know. Good to know. Well, Amy and Landon, thanks so much for joining us today. If people have more questions, how can they get a hold of you?
They can call our office, 970-242-PEST. Find us on jerryspestcontrol.com.
And Jerry's Pest Control is actually a KAFM underwriter, so we thank you for your support there as well. This segment airs on the second Wednesday of each month, and you can also listen to podcasts on demand at kafmcommunityradio.org. And make sure to join us next month for another edition of House Talk. If you have any topics that you would like for me to cover, feel free to give me a call or check out my website. Let me know what you want to know about. You can reach me at 970-985-8555 or visit kateporras.com.